Reverie True Crime is a proud member and co-founder of the Darkcast Network. The light shines brightest on our indie podcasts. Please check out the show notes for the website and discover more indie podcasts with a dark side.
Is your Netflix queue basically all true crime movies and series?
Do you ever wonder why you can't open a bottle of Tylenol without using the jaws of life? Crime Culture, hosted by me, Haley Langan,
And me, Caitlin Mahar,
is a podcast that discusses true crime, pop culture, and how the two relate. From killers that have inspired hit films like Silence of the Lambs,
to the motives for crimes such as the murder of John Lennon. Join Haley and me every Tuesday to discover the pop culture side of true crime.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. On July 20th, 2012, a detective walked into the Century 16 Theater, into Theater 9, and looked around at the carnage, which I'll get into in Part 3. He saw the weapons, ammunition, the bloodshed, and 10 deceased people. Altogether, 12 people lost their lives that night. After listening to the last episode, and if you did take a look at any of the psychiatric footage of James, he seems like a shy, average person, possibly like someone we may know, or even pass by on the street. Picturing him going up to a lot of these people, shooting them at point-blank range is unbelievable. It's unfathomable that someone can be so unhinged and you would never know it by merely looking at them. For a person to walk up to multiple people with the intention to kill them is something the majority of us could never bring ourselves to even think about doing. Can you imagine the extreme fright that had to be pulsing through everyone's veins and through their minds when the gunshots began to ring out? These innocent people thought they were just going to see a movie. I wanted to devote a whole episode to the victims before I dive into all of the details of what actually happened. In the previous episode, I inaccurately said there were 166 victims. When I looked closer, I saw some of the deaths and injuries were counted as multiple charges, and those numbers were not victims. There are actually 84 victims altogether in the court records, which that number is still incomprehensible. If I mispronounce anyone's name, I do apologize in advance. I also tried to find any information I could on all of the victims. Now, let's get started. First, I'm going to tell you about the 12 victims who lost their lives that night. 26-year-old Jonathan Blanc was shot in the head and chest. Jonathan was a father to a 4-year-old little girl and a 2-year-old baby boy. He spent 5 years of his young life serving in the Navy as an aircraft carrier. Jonathan had left the Navy about a year and a half prior to the shooting. While he was trying to re-enlist, he was employed installing hardwood floors. His father, Randall Blanc, said his son was a great person who was into driving four-wheel ATVs, and he was very much an outdoorsman. He was also a certified firefighter and EMT. Jonathan was at the movie with a friend when the shots were fired. He told her to stay down as he shielded her with his body. He was killed, saving her life. One of Jonathan's friends said it was always guts or glory for Jonathan, that he always dreamed to be a first responder on the front line. So it was not surprising to anyone when they found out he died defending someone's life. 18-year-old Alexander Boyk was found with a shot to the head, which also caused injuries to his chest and right arm. Alexander went to Gateway High School in Aurora, and he was excited to head off to college at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design in the fall. His dream was to eventually be an art teacher and open his very own studio. Alexander's family misses this talented young man who loved to play baseball, make pottery, and was a music lover. Alexander's friends miss the person they called wonderful, someone you always wanted to be around, funny, loving, caring, and outgoing. 29-year-old Jesse Childress suffered a gunshot to the torso, which also injured his legs and his right arm. Jesse was a staff sergeant, originally from Thornton, Colorado, an Air Force reservist who was on active duty with the 310th Forces Support Squadron on Buckley Air Force Base. He was an Air Force cyber systems operator. Jesse was fun, knowledgeable, experienced at his job, respectful to everyone. He was like a brother to all of his friends and a positive person who was always laughing. A gunshot wound to the chest, which caused critical internal injuries, took the life of 51-year-old Gordon Cowden. That night, he and his teenage daughters were spending quality time together as a family at the movies. Thankfully, the teenagers were not injured physically, but mentally and emotionally, they experienced a night of hell, and they may still deal with trauma from that horrific night. Gordon was said to be a true Texas gentleman who lived life always doing what he thought was right, no matter what. He adored his family, who he was completely devoted to, and enjoyed life being an outdoorsman and a small business owner. He had a witty sense of humor, and he loved to travel the world. 24-year-old Jessica Gowie suffered 6 gunshot wounds, 4 to her torso and extremities, and a shot to the head. She was found hanging on by a thread and whisked away to the University Hospital, where she was shortly pronounced deceased. Jessica was in college. She wanted to have a career in sports radio, and she was working that summer at a radio station in Denver as an intern. She was an enthusiastic and confident young woman. She was going to apply for even more internships when fall came. People in Jessica's life called her smart, brilliant, and witty. Jessica had recently written a blog post about making it out alive of the June 2012 Eaton Center Mall shooting in Toronto. 2 people were killed by gunman Christopher Husbands during that traumatic event, and many were injured. Of the Toronto shooting, she wrote, quote, "I was shown how fragile life was on Saturday. I saw the terror on bystanders' faces. I saw the victims of a senseless crime. I saw lives change. I was reminded that we don't know when or where our time on earth will end, when or where we will breathe our last breath." End quote. 27-year-old Matthew McQuinn was shot 9 times. The fatal shots were to his neck and chest. Matthew and his girlfriend Samantha Yowler had been together since March of 2009. Originally from Springfield, Ohio, Matthew graduated high school from Vandalia Butler High School in 2004. He made the move to Colorado in 2011 and was employed at Target. Matthew, Samantha, and her brother Nick all went out to see The Dark Knight Rises. Suddenly, canisters of pepper spray flew out into the audience, and then shots were fired. Thankfully, Nick got out of the theater uninjured, but Samantha did get shot before Nick was able to pull his sister out of the theater with him. Matthew was killed as he heroically acted as a shield for Samantha, the woman he loved so much. 23-year-old Michaela Medic died due to a penetrating gunshot to the chest. She was a student at the Community College of Aurora and worked at Subway while she was on a journey that so many 20-somethings take, figuring out what she wanted to do with her life. In your early 20s, you always believe there will be many tomorrows. Her journey and the many years she should have had ahead of her were just gone in the blink of an eye. My heart breaks for all of these kids who had not even started to experience life. Michaela was an outgoing person with great friends surrounding her. She, her dad, and her sister were practically joined at the hip. 6-year-old Veronica Moser Sullivan was shot and taken to the Children's Hospital, where she passed away from gunshots to her trunk, extremities, and chest. Veronica had just began learning how to swim, which she absolutely loved. She was a bubbly, radiant, inquisitive little girl who could make anyone's day better and brighter. Such a little ray of sunshine. She was curious about everything and always had a question. It was said that she wanted to know everything about the whole world that she could. The 6-year-old always said she wanted to be a police officer one day. So the Aurora Police Department made Veronica an honorary officer of the police force. Veronica's mother, Ashley, was terribly injured that night, and on top of it all, not only did she lose her little girl, but she suffered a miscarriage due to being shot in the abdomen, and she was also paralyzed from a bullet getting lodged in her spinal cord. She can no longer control her bodily functions and is a wheelchair-bound paraplegic, but she does have a little movement in her arms and hands. Ashley was 3 months pregnant. When the shooting began, her motherly instincts kicked in, and she grabbed Veronica's hand, sprinting towards the exit, but Veronica's hand slipped out of hers. Ashley felt a strike to the chest and fell over onto her 6-year-old. They were at the theater with Ashley's boyfriend Jameson and his little cousin, 16-year-old Kaylin Bailey. Kaylin called the police, screaming and crying, as the chaos in the background ensued. The 911 operator instructed Kaylin to do CPR on the 6-year-old, and Kaylin panicked and cried, saying she couldn't because she was pinned down by Ashley, who was at this point going to be harder to move as she was unconscious, and a 13-year-old likely could not move an adult body while terrified in a situation like that. Sourcing from an article from The Sun, Kaylin said, quote, "Everybody in the theater turned in unison to see what had just been thrown. I thought it was one of the people who had dressed up, like trying to play a prank or something in celebration of the movie. And then it's like, as soon as everyone's head turned, James saw that as his opportunity to start shooting." Kaylin said she scooted down in her chair as she tried to figure out what to do next. That's when her cousin Jameson pulled her down to the ground. She continued, quote, "The gunfire would go off rapidly and then it would just stop. And when it stopped, me, Jameson, and Ashley would look up to see what was happening. Eventually, Ashley looked up, and that's when she got shot." In the midst of all of this, I can hear Veronica moaning, and she's not really saying words, just making sounds like she's in pain. Then I look at my hands and her shirt, and they're both covered in blood. End quote. Sergeant Mike Hawkins fell apart in court, testifying about how he spotted Veronica and immediately swept her up into his arms. In court, he said, quote, "No child was going to be left at that scene. It was horrific enough without having to have one of my officers step over the body of a little girl at the nearest door. That was just not gonna happen." End quote. 27-year-old Alex Sullivan passed away from a piercing gunshot to his chest. Alex was out to see the movie for his 27th birthday, and The Dark Knight Rises was probably one that he was really looking forward to because he loved comic books. His friends lovingly called him a nerd, a huge movie fan who even would take any job positions available at movie theaters just so he could see any movie he wanted, and his favorite sports team was the New York Mets. He was intelligent, hilarious, and cherished by everyone who knew him. 24-year-old Alexander Teves was fatally shot in the head. Alexander had recently graduated and received a master's degree in counseling psychology. He was going back to school because he was determined to get a doctorate in physical therapy as well. Alexander was very ambitious and wanted to help as many people as he could. He loved to go on adventures with his girlfriend, Amanda Lindgren. They would leave town to go listen to country music and different events, but what they enjoyed the most was staying at home in their apartment, just talking and spending time together. Alexander, like Matthew and Jonathan, was killed trying to protect his girlfriend as he pulled her down to the floor, covering her head. Amanda said, quote, "He was my angel that day. He saved me, and he's been my angel since the day I met him." End quote. 32-year-old Rebecca Wingo suffered a fatal gunshot to the head. She also suffered a bursting shot to her trunk and gunshots to her extremities. Rebecca was a loving mother, raising 2 little girls on her own while attending Aurora Community College, working on an Associate of Arts degree and working as a customer relations representative at a medical imaging company. 27-year-old John Larimer suffered gunshots to his chest and abdomen. John was raised in Crystal Lake, Illinois, and had 4 siblings. He had just joined the Navy the summer before the tragedy and was a petty officer 3rd class stationed in Aurora since October of 2011. John's family was obviously shocked and still cannot believe it years later. Being in the military, they did say they expected him to be in harm's way, but I'm sure they never expected John or anyone else to be in harm's way just going to see a movie. John's commander, Jeffrey Jakubowski, said in a statement, quote, "I am incredibly saddened by the loss of Petty Officer John Larimer. He was an outstanding shipmate, a valued member of our Navy team. He will be missed by all who knew him. My heart goes out to John's family, friends, and loved ones, as well as to all victims of this horrible tragedy." End quote. Those were the 12 who lost their lives. Now I'm going to tell you the victims who survived. Petra Anderson suffered a gunshot wound to her face. Aiden Avila was shot in the right lower leg and left arm. Brandon Axelrod was discovered miserably suffering from injuries to ligaments in his knee while he was trying to escape. Tony Bilipondo was found in agonizing pain from gunshot damage to her face. Christina Blanche endured injuries from shots to her left and right leg. Maria Carbonell was in excruciating pain from a bullet to her right thigh. Alejandra Cardana Lamas suffered bullet wounds to her right hip, thigh, and groin. Louis Duran was found with gunshot wounds to his chest, knee, head, and arm. Craig Inland was discovered with gunshot injuries to his right and left shoulder, left arm, and the left side of his face. Alex Espinoza was in severe pain from gunshot wounds to his triceps and upper arm. Jacqueline Fry suffered shots to her right arm, thigh, knee, and she also lost a tooth. Yusuf Garby was found with bullet wounds to his head and right arm. Zachary Goldich was shot in the neck, and he was also wounded due to bullets and fragments that were shot into Theater 8. Manira Moni Gravelli was shot in the head, right and left arm, and her hand. Eugene Hahn had bullet wounds in his right hip, leg, and pelvis. Kristen Davis was wounded from shots to her back and butt. Katie Medley agonizingly suffered a shot to her head. Jasmine Kennedy was found suffering injuries from a gunshot wound to her lower right leg. Marcus Kazar suffered gunshot wounds to his lower legs. Patricia Legaretta suffered a shot to her lower right leg. Brenton Lowick endured bullet wounds to his left butt cheek, hip, and back. Ryan Lumba had bullet wounds to his left hip, abdomen, chest, and arm. Caleb Medley was found with severe gunshot wounds to his face, right eye, and head. Ashley Moser was found with bullet wounds on the left side of her chest and torso. Stephen Motton endured gunshot injuries to his shoulder and spine. Joshua Nolan suffered gunshot wounds to his right arm, abdomen, and leg. Pierce O'Farrell painfully endured gunshot injuries to his left arm and foot. Perdeo Patria suffered a bullet wound to the lower left back. Rita Paulina was found with bullet wounds to her upper left arm and leg. Christopher Raposa was found suffering from multiple gunshot wounds. The record did not say where on his body. Carly Richards was found shot with various bullet wounds to her chest, back, arms, and legs. Dion Roseborough suffered a gunshot wound to the right shoulder. His experience, he told Detective Fredrickson, was that he saw the shooter come up to him, about 5 feet away, wearing headgear. The person proceeded to shoot him in the shoulder with some sort of automatic weapon. Kerry Rotman was shot in his upper right leg. Lucas Smith suffered shots to his right pelvis and thigh. Heather Snyder was found with gunshot injuries to her right arm, hand, left thigh, knee, and lower leg. Farah Sudani was discovered with a gunshot wound to her stomach. A police officer swiftly took her to the hospital. She told Detective Fredrickson she was in Theater 9 when a tear gas can was hurled over her head, and soon after she heard pops. She rose out of her seat when the pops quit, and shortly after she was shot in her left side. Catherine Strebe was found with gunshot wounds to her left lower back and butt. Jameson Toes suffered a gunshot wound to his head. Denise Trenum Axelrod endured shots to her right lower back and butt. Marcus Weaver had gunshot injuries to his right shoulder, elbow, and both legs. Michael White Jr. was shot in the right side of his torso and shoulder. David Williams was discovered having gunshot injuries to his left hand and fingers. Aline Young had gunshot wounds to her chest and back. Jansen Young was found with bullet wounds on the left side of her torso. Samantha Yowler suffered bullet wounds to her right knee. Gage Hankins endured gunshot wounds to his right arm, as well as shrapnel retention when the bullets and fragments were fired through the wall of Theater 9 and went into Theater 8. Michaela Hicks was also in Theater 8 and had a bullet wound on the right side of her face. Stephen Barton suffered a bullet wound to the head and shrapnel injuries to his chest. Nicholas Gallup had a gunshot injury to the head as well as shrapnel embedded right by his temporal artery. Evan Ferris was found with a fractured ankle and a bullet graze wound. Jennifer Avila Arredondo suffered a bullet wound to her head. Gerald Brooks was found with a gunshot injury to his left thigh. Amanda Hernandez Memege was discovered with a minor head injury. Kelly Lewis was discovered with a chemical irritation. Bonnie Zogby had been found with a bullet wound to her left knee. Angiette Mora endured gunshot wounds to the left side of the face and eye. Ethan Roars was discovered with bumps and bruises from being dropped by his parents as they tried to escape the theater. Nathan Juranek suffered bullet wounds to the lower right leg and calf. Corbin Dates was found with a bullet wound to the arm. Lauren Ellis had endured shotgun wounds to her left shoulder, neck, and back. Jamie Roars had an injured ankle and wrist as well as bruises as he tried to flee the theater. Evan Morrison had a dislocated knee. Rochelle Hill suffered chemical irritation and a head injury. Kaylin Bailey endured chemical irritation. Kelly Bowen was shot in her leg. Shirley Clark was found with a minor head injury. Haley Hensley suffered chemical irritation. Victor Nava had a gunshot wound to his right arm and hand. Debra Thomas Kazar had bullet wounds to her abdomen. And lastly, Caitlin Petticord suffered a right knee injury. The survivors of this dreadful night thought what happened was all a stunt, a part of the show, until they realized the shooter in front of the movie screen had a real AR-15 and people were really getting shot. On July 22, 2012, family, friends, and everyone in mourning came together for a memorial at the Fountain of Aurora Municipal Center after they had a candlelight prayer vigil. And that is going to wrap up part 2. My thoughts, my love go out to the victims' families and friends, survivors, and everyone impacted by this absolute tragedy. If you are a survivor and or a close family member to someone who lost their life that night and you want to have your voice heard, please do not hesitate to email me at reverytruecrime@gmail.com. Next week, I will start to cover what happened, more psychiatric evaluation. We'll move on to the trial and then talk about the aftermath of the shooting. It definitely is a lot to cover. I want to have it all summed up in the next episode. However, there could always be a part 4. I'm not sure yet, so stay tuned. Until next time, please, everyone, stay safe and take care.